Chapter 847. Until my body breaks. Coming into the pillar of gluttony, I expected things to be rather serious, but I was surprised to see that the situation wasn't as dire as I expected it to be. In fact, the situation was a lot more advantageous than I thought it to be. "Is this your doing?" I turned to look at Liam, who was hanging on the bridge of the princess's nose. He seemed battered and tired, but the moment our eyes met, his expression relaxed a little. "Oh hey Rin. How have you been? You did a good job." Ignoring his light-hearted greeting, I lowered my head to stare at the cheeks of the princess, which were currently inflated. I could feel a certain energy from within, and when I turned my gaze away, I locked my eyes on a certain figure in the distance. It must be her doing. There was only one person that was capable of producing such pure and powerful energy. Although Liam was strong, he wasn't at this level just yet. It could only be her. I think I understand what's going on. Rumble. Rumble. At the same time I realized what was happening, the princess trashed around and destroyed everything that her feet stepped onto too. Gradually, however, she was able to somewhat stabilize the injury that she sustained in her eye, and the energy inside of her started to calm down. We can't be having that. If there was anything that I couldn't allow, it was that, and as my vision blurred, my feet touched something soft. I was standing right on top of her cheek, and the moment I appeared over there, I felt two eyes lock on me. When I turned my head, our gazes met, and I lowered my hand and pressed it against her cheek. Her expression changed drastically at that point, but it was already too late. Exerting a lot the mana inside of me, her cheeks started to inflate even further, and the energy that she was trying to keep in check became even wilder. Rumble. Rumble. Her trashing increased, and it became hard for me to keep myself steady as a result. A large shadow cast behind me, and I knew exactly what she was trying to do. Thus, frowning, I opened my mouth and imbued my voice with the laws. "Stop." Her body stopped at my words, and her expression changed once more. Golden runes and words clamped her hand above me, and covered every inch of her body. She seemed to be saying something, but I honestly couldn't understand a single word that she said. Not that I cared, as I continued to imbue her cheeks with mana. Within a matter of seconds, her cheeks swelled even further, and their size grew to such an extent that her entire face became red. The cheeks were puffed up to such an extent that I could see the skin on her cheeks tearing. "Don't move." Whenever she was about to free herself from my restraints, I'd speak again. Whenever I did so, my body would start to flicker in and out of existence, and accompanying it was an agonizing pain, but I resisted through the pain and continued to inject mana into her cheeks. As I continued to inject more of the laws that were contained within my body into hers, the golden runes that surrounded her body began to flicker continuously. MHH. Her muffled screams rang throughout, but I paid them no attention and continued to work. With time, the tear around her cheek deepened and blood started to leak down her cheeks. When I looked back, I was met with two eyes that were glaring hatred in my direction. I stared at them for a short moment, and savored the gaze before pressing my foot against her cheek and finding myself standing right in front of Liam once again. "Let's go." I reached out my hand, which Liam gladly took, and pressed my foot against her skin once more. We appeared quite a fair distance away from her, and when I looked around and saw that the place was safe, I snapped my fingers. Bawang. It was an explosion unlike any other. The moment I snapped my fingers, the princess's body inflated rapidly, and her cheeks finally burst apart. Black blood rained from the sky, and pieces of flesh fell all over the land. At the same time, a wave of concentrated energy burst out from that direction, shredding everything that was within its path. Extending my hand and erecting a barrier around the two of us, we were able to avoid getting injured from the residual energy. I frowned when I felt the energy. It was quite overbearing, and if not for my strength, I'd have difficulty handling it. I can't believe she was able to suppress this much energy inside of her. She wasn't one of the 7 clan heads without a reason. She is indeed extremely powerful. Stay here for now, I'll finish up things. Dropping off Liam, my vision blurred once more, and what appeared in my vision was an enormous crater that seemed to stretch very deeply. Frowning, I flicked my finger and a small light entered the hole. Shortly after, my brows relaxed and I nodded my head. As expected, she didn't die just yet. Motioning with my fingers, a body burst out from the hole and I clapped my hands once. Clap. A small barrier erected around the body once I clapped my hands. Just in case, I tapped onto the barrier and a small white ripple formed, creating a second layer. Just in case. Gazing at the body before me, I relaxed when I saw that the princess had fainted. While her cheeks had burst, they were slowly healing as her flesh wiggled and overlapped against each other. The sight was quite gruesome. Her eyelids trembled and I could tell that she was about to wake up. Noticing this, I knew that I couldn't waste any time and stretched my hand which passed through the two layers and reached out for her face. I'll make this quick. Closing my eyes, I felt the laws that were contained within her body and channeled them toward me. Almost instantly, a wave of warmth entered my body and I found myself relaxing as the laws within my body started to increase. The feeling was pleasant, almost intoxicating. If not for the fact that I had felt this sensation before, I'd have fallen into a deeper sense of depravity, but I held my focus and transferred all of her laws into body. Wag. At the same time that I retrieved all of the laws, I felt a sharp pain course through all parts of my body, and I almost fainted from the pain right then and there. The fact that I wasn't able to suppress the pain was a testament to how painful it was, and I almost cried out from the pain. It took every last bit of me to suppress my scream as I gritted my teeth with everything I had, and my body flickered wildly at that point. Crack. Unsurprisingly, cracks started to appear on all parts of my body, and the pain became even more unbearable. My body was failing. Ugh. No, not yet, not now. I knew exactly what was happening to me at the moment. This was a consequence of using the laws too much with this unfit body. I had been warned beforehand about the consequences of using the laws with this body, but I chose to ignore such warning. I was now paying the consequences of ignoring such word, but not once did I start regretting my decision to use the laws. I just did what I had to do, and even if the pain was unbearable, I calmly accepted it, knowing that there was something else eating up at me that made the pain that I was bearing somewhat bearable. Not yet. Taking a deep breath, I shifted my attention back toward the princess and extended my hand once more. Reaching out for my hand, I could see that it was trembling rather fiercely at that. I was struggling quite a bit at the moment, but clenching my teeth I moved my hand toward her left armpit. I could feel the core over there, but just as I was about to reach her armpit, her eyes fluttered open and our two eyes met. My heart, which had somewhat steadied, suddenly started to beat wildly, and I swallowed a mouthful of saliva. I stood no chance against her at my current state. My lips went dry as our gazes met, and her eyes, which were somewhat blurry, started to regain some clarity. Now. Spurt. Clenching my teeth, I used all of my remaining strength and pierced right at the left armpit area. At the same time that happened, clarity returned to the princess's eyes and her mouth parted open. You bastard, howda. Crack. It was too late. Before she could even finish her sentence, I crushed the core in my hand and her figure froze on the spot. Her expression changed drastically at that point, but it was already too late. Shortly after, her figure turned into dust which disappeared into thin air. Thump. At the same time that happened, unable to keep my legs steady, my body fell down, and I blankly stared at the sky. Almost there. Just one more. Chapter 848, Meeting Him Again. Deep within the vast expanse of the cosmos, a place isolated by the nothingness of space, there was a sudden stir. The surroundings trembled and quaked as if struggling to contain a force beyond measure. And then, with a sudden shattering of the void, a crack appeared. Crack. Jezebeth emerged from behind the fissure, his form wreathed in a hue of otherworldly energy. He gazed out at the myriad stars that peppered the infinite expanse, his expression one of both wonder and seriousness. Taking in the sights around him, Jezebeth's eyes widened in confusion as he beheld the countless stars twinkling in the distance. He stood there for a moment, taking in the beauty of it all, unsure of what had happened, before his expression changed and his demeanor became more serious. So that's how it is. He muttered under his breath, a glint of understanding in his eyes. In an instant, scenes started to replay inside his mind, and excitement rose from deep within him. He pressed his hand against his chest, feeling his core pulsating faster as he reveled in his realization. I'm sure of it, he's on his last breath. Whatever happened to him was a last-ditch attempt by Rin to buy himself time and delay whatever he was planning. A pity that he no longer had time. He felt it during the last moments. He was done for. The laws within Ren's body were almost faint, and his power was weaker than it had ever been. Victory seemed inevitable, but it's still not over yet. Only once Ren dies will everything finally be over. Despite his elation, Jezebeth managed to maintain his composure, knowing that the battle was not yet won. He closed his eyes and breathed in the chill of the void, letting the energy of the cosmos seep into his very being. It was a heady sensation, like standing at the edge of a precipice and looking out at the endless horizon. But despite the rush of excitement that pulsed through him, he knew that he had to remain focused. So he opened his eyes once more and gazed out at the stars with newfound clarity. "You've run out of time, Ren. I'm sure of it." Having understood the motive behind Ren's last actions, Jezebeth knew that the ending was within sight. A viscous white hue emerged from deep within his body and burst out of him. His eyes soon fixed on a certain planet in the far cosmos, and he pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his core. It was a reminder of his mortality, of the fact that even he had not yet grasped the ultimate power he was chasing after. It was a feeling he had felt many times, and at the same time he knew this was the last time he'd feel it. So long as he absorbed the records, he'd no longer be immortal. With a sudden burst of energy, another crack appeared in the space before him. Without hesitation, Jezebeth stepped forward, his form engulfed in a pulsing aura of laws. He vanished through the tear, leaving behind nothing but the faint echo of his voice. "You can't delay the inevitable. So that's your choice, Angelica." A soft yet alluring voice whispered throughout. Sat upon her throne inside of a large hall, her beauty was a striking contrast to the ominous atmosphere around the hall. Her skin was the color of moonlit silver with dark, swirling patterns that seemed to shift and move like smoke. Her hair, a deep black, cascaded down her back in loose waves. Her eyes were the color of molten gold, and they glinted with an otherworldly fire. I can't say I didn't see this coming. What she saw, she had long seen coming. It wasn't surprising to her. What surprised her was something different. "So the strategist is a human, huh?" The fire within her eyes glinted a different shade as she fell into her own thoughts and leaned back against her throne that was carved from black obsidian, and it seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. The hall around her was vast and cavernous, with towering pillars that disappeared into the shadows above. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the distant echoes of the demons within the hall. As she sat upon her throne, the demoness radiated a quiet power. Her long, slender fingers rested on the armrests of her throne, and her gaze was fixed on some distant point beyond the walls of the hall. Her lips were set in a faint smile, as if she had witnessed something that brought amusement to herself. Despite her beauty, there was a coldness to her that chilled the very air around her. Her presence was both alluring and terrifying, drawing anyone to her with a magnetic pull that they could not resist. And yet, those who gazed into her eyes could see the darkness that lurked within, a darkness that threatened to consume all those who dared to draw too close. She was none other than Lilith von Deux, the pillar master of the House of Lust and Angelica's mother. It really is a pity. Tearing her gaze away from the distance, she closed her eyes and silence returned to the grand halls. Raising her hand, she snapped her fingers. "Bring her to me." "It's really nice to have you back, Small Snake." Hein could barely keep his emotions in check as he looked at Small Snake in front of him. Although he had changed over the years, he still looked like the Small Snake he knew. "Just wait until Ryan finds out that you're still alive. He'll probably be the most excited." While everyone missed Small Snake, the one he was closest to was Ryan. He was also the one who had been hit the hardest by his death, and while he did not show it, he was still heavily impacted by it. He was still young back then. "Ryan." Muttering under his breath, Small Snake lowered his head and touched his chin. "How is he doing?" "He's doing great. He's grown a lot during the time that you weren't here. In fact, almost everyone has grown a lot during the time that you weren't with us." Funnily enough, Leopold stopped Smock. "We can continue our talk later." Perhaps because he was excited about suddenly finding out that Small Snake was still alive again, Hein started to talk a lot. He had to be stopped by Angelica, whose words coldly cut through his. When he turned his head to look at her, he could see that her expression was as cold as it had always been, but he could also tell that it was merely an act. She was probably holding herself back from showing her emotions. "We don't have time to catch up at the moment. Although I've tried my best to keep them from prying onto us, I can tell that we've been spotted. The air instantly froze at her words and everyone turned to look at her. We've been spotted? What do you mean by that? It's as I said, Ava. Turning her head to stare into the distance, her lips twitched and she lowered her head. We've been surrounded. Russell. Russell. Shortly after her words faded, over 10 powerful auras exploded out from the bushes, surrounding them. Hein and the others were immediately startled by their sudden appearance and drew their weapons. Don't resist. It's no use. Only after hearing Angelica's words did they lower their weapons. They didn't need to be reminded by Angelica to understand that they were unevenly matched at the moment. One wrong move and they could very well be meeting their ends. Young Mississippi. The atmosphere froze once more at the words that came out of one of the demons' mouths. Ava and Hein already had an idea and thus weren't shocked, but the same couldn't be said for Small Snake, who was taken aback by the situation. I'll explain later. Angelica only left a couple of words before taking a step forward. What are you doing here? We've come under Her Highness's orders to bring you back. Just me. No. The demon shook his head and cast a glance in their direction. Angelica smirked at the sight. Heh. I figured she'd be like that. There was clear disappointment in Angelica's expression as she heard those words, but she seemed to have already expected such an answer and was quick to recover her usually cold expression. All right. She nodded her head and looked at the demons around her. Bring us to her. She stopped halfway through and glared at those surrounding her. May I remind you not to overstep your boundaries. If you so much as harm a hair to them, I'll make sure you guys pay a price adequate to your actions. Her words didn't bring much of a change in the expressions of the demons, but when Hein paid closer attention he noticed that their stances straightened up a little. Just how high up is her mother? That was the same question that arose in the minds of everyone present. None dared to ask as they remained silent throughout the entire time. Follow us, we will escort you to Her Highness. Okay. Following that, they followed Angelica from behind as she followed the demons in front of her. They were reluctant to do so, but seeing that they had no other choice, they could only obediently follow Angelica from behind. It was the only thing that they could do. That's a bit grand. Hein couldn't believe his eyes as he stared at the colossal mountain that lay ahead of him. He had assumed that they would fly to their destination given the fact that every one of them was above Marquis rank and thus could fly. However, much to his surprise, they were made to walk all the way toward the towering peak that loomed in the distance. As they trudged along, Hein couldn't help but marvel at the sheer size of the mountain. Its peak disappeared into the clouds, and its slopes were covered in a thick blanket of snow. The air grew colder with each step they took, and Hein wrapped his cloak tighter around himself, shivering slightly in the biting chill. Hoo! Each of his breaths grew misty, and his shoes sank under the tall snow. After what felt like hours of walking, they finally reached the foot of the mountain. Hein's breath hitched as he looked up and saw a magnificent structure etched into the side of the mountain. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The structure stood tall and majestic, with intricate carvings and sculptures adorning its walls. The stone used to build it seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow, and Hein couldn't help but be in awe of its grandeur. The walls of the structure were adorned with large sculptures of fearsome demons, their eyes seeming to follow Hein's every move. Hein noticed several demons standing atop the walls, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. Their imposing presence sent a shiver down his spine. Several of them were above his strength, and he wondered if he could fend them off if they fought. Probably not. The demons wore elaborate armor, and their eyes glowed with an eerie red hue, making them appear even more menacing. As they approached the entrance of the structure, Hein couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation mixed with curiosity. He wondered what lay inside this mysterious mountain fortress. The doors were massive, made of solid iron, and adorned with intricate engravings that seemed to glow a mysterious hue. Open the door. The demons accompanying Hein raised their hands, and the doors creaked open slowly, revealing a grand hall inside. Hein's eyes widened in amazement as he stepped into the vast chamber. The walls were lined with tapestries depicting scenes of battles and conquests, and the ceiling soared high above, adorned with an elaborate mural depicting the history of the demon realm. At the far end of the hall, Hein caught a glimpse of what appeared to be an obsidian throne, adorned with gemstones that glittered with an otherworldly light. As he approached, he realized that the throne was occupied by an alluring figure, clad in regal attire and exuding an aura of power. Her head was currently resting against her fist, allowing her black hair to cascade down the side of her shoulder. The moment they entered, her eyes flicked open and her gaze paused on Angelica. A faint smile spread across her features as her mouth parted open. "What have you been up to, my good daughter?" Chapter 849. Meeting him again. There was something about her voice that made it hard for those who were listening to it to keep their heads straight. It was as if a fog suddenly appeared within their minds, making it hard for them to think or even move properly. Thankfully, Ava and Hein had signed a contract with Angelica beforehand and were thus only slightly affected. The same couldn't be said for Small Snake, who found himself sinking in this cloudy state, unable to move at all. "Would you stop it with your stupid tricks?" It was only after Angelica intervened that he was able to snap out of whatever state he was in, and the moment he snapped out of it, cold sweat ran down his back. That was dangerous. I guess I can now understand why everyone reacted like that. This wasn't the first time that he had come into contact with the patriarch of the Lust clan, but before he had always been with Jezebeth and thus never experienced such a sensation from her. He had always been confused as to why, whenever she appeared, those around her would glare at her while some demons by her side would cock their heads from side to side like buffoons. Only now did he understand. "Oh my, is that how you speak to your mother?" There was a look of sadness on the princess's face as she looked at Angelica. If not for the fact that he had seen a couple of her antics back when he was with Jezebeth, Small Snake would have fallen for her acting. Still, he was utterly shocked by the sudden revelation regarding Angelica's mother. "She's the daughter of a princess-ranked entity, one of the 7 heads at that?" Small Snake wasn't too sure how to react at the moment. The sudden piece of news left him utterly dumbfounded, and he couldn't help but cast a few glances at the mother-daughter pair. "And just when I thought I saw everything." Well, they did both look beautiful. So there was a bit of resemblance. "I exerted a lot of my force to have you come to me, and the moment that you see me you start shouting at me? I feel rather sad." Angelica. Lowering her head, she looked pitiful, and many of the demons around her started to show signs of concern. Even Small Snake felt a slight impulse, but he pinched his arms and forced himself out of such a state. Keep focus. They were at a disadvantage at the moment. Be it in power or numbers. Even if they wanted to, they'd be unable to escape, and it made Small Snake wonder just what Angelica was planning. He had a few means of his own to get out of the situation if it went for the worst, but he chose to keep them under wraps and let everything play out in front of him. "Are you still in the mood to play around?" Once again, Angelica's words were merciless and cut right at her mother's words. The princess didn't seem offended by her actions and smiled even more seductively. "Rebellious, aren't we?" "Quite. At least you acknowledge it. A lot better than a certain someone." My, when did you start learning to speak this way to your mother?" "From the moment that you kicked me out." "Hey, that was because of your mistake. It had nothing to do with us." Angelica laughed while covering her forehead with her hand. "I knew you'd say that." It was clear to everyone present that the relationship between Angelica and her mother was anything but good. Angelica didn't even bother hiding her disgust for her mother, as her words were laced with venom. "In the end, it's always my fault and never your fault, right? Wasn't that obvious enough?" Princess Lilith spoke, her gaze lingering over everyone present. There was something about her gaze that unsettled Small Snake, but as weak as he was, he could only take it. Soon her gaze fell on him and Small Snake felt his skin crawl. I'm rather surprised that you're here. I didn't know that you were acquainted with my daughter. In fact, from the looks of things, you guys are a lot closer than I anticipated. We've worked together in the past. We've known each other for a few years." Angelica replied before Small Snake could. Seeing that Angelica had spoken for him, Small Snake closed his mouth and remained quiet. It was good that she spoke for him. He didn't really want to talk at the moment. "Oh, you two have known each other for a few years? I take it that he was also working for the same human you're working for, right?" Angelica didn't respond to the question, but her silence was enough confirmation for her mother, who nodded her head slightly. She looked back at Small Snake. "For His Majesty to also covet his subordinates. I assume that this human is rather talented." Brushing her hair behind her ear, she sat up properly on the throne and crossed her legs. Her gaze fell on Ava and Hein. I suppose they are also his subordinates. With a squint of her eyes, Ava and Hein's bodies froze on the spot, and their eyes widened. What are you doing? They only recovered after Angelica spoke and broke off whatever was clawing at them. That didn't seem to please her mother, who suddenly frowned. The air in the hall changed drastically at that point. You've been acting rather impudent for a while, my good daughter. Her words were soft, but the moment they came out, the entire room froze. A formless pressure spread throughout every inch of the room, and Small Snake found himself unable to move at all. How many times has it been now? The same went for the others that went stiff on the spot. The only one that was fine was Angelica, but even she seemed to be struggling at the moment as her face paled and sweat trickled down her forehead. She continued to glare at her mother. I've been acting impudent? She managed to utter a few words through her gnashed teeth. Oh, what's funnier is the fact that you still have the gall to call yourself my Smack. It all happened so fast and Small Snake wasn't able to see what had happened, but halfway through her sentence, Small Snake heard a low smacking sound, and Angelica's body appeared on one of the pillars of the hall. Bang! Appearing on the spot where Angelica had been, Small Snake caught sight of Princess Lilith, and his pupils dilated. Especially when his gaze fell on Angelica. Puff. Cough. Coughing several times, she looked up and smirked at her mother. You didn't hold back, did you, mother? Angelica's speech became more drawn out as she approached the final word, as if she wanted to emphasize its significance even more. It was obvious that she was trying to taunt her mother, and she was successful in doing so. Swoosh. Appearing right in front of her, the princess looked down on her from above with her cold eyes. You've been quite rebellious since you've returned. I let you be since I figured you'd come around, but it seems like some harsh disciplining may be required. Grabbing Angelica by her hair, the princess flung her toward the next pillar. Bang! Angelica's body slammed into the pillar as she struggled to resist the strength of her mother, and she let out a painful groan as she did so. Ugh! Swoosh! She didn't even have time to recover before her mother appeared before her once again and smacked her head against the pillar. Bang! Don't resent me too much, she said, smacking her face with her palm. I'm only doing what's best for you, my good D. Pooh. Fuck you, bitch. A sudden spit that was mixed with black blood flew to the princess's face, and her entire expression froze at that moment. It wasn't just her that froze. Practically everyone in the room felt something dreadful slowly rise from the princess' body. Moving her fingers to her cheek and sliding them off. The princess looked at her finger and her expression, which seemed unusually calm, started to distort heavily. Rumble. Rumble. The entire room started to tremble, and before long the princess' gaze fell on Angelica. The way she looked at her was no longer the same as it was before. I see how it is. She nodded her head repeatedly, seemingly coming to a sudden understanding. I get it now. She nodded once more. I don't know what went through my mind. Since when did I ever have a daughter? Spurt. Chapter 850 Meeting him again 3. Ugh. Feeling something stab her in the abdominal area, Angelica let out a sharp wail. The pain was unbearable, and when she looked up she was met with two mercilessly cold eyes that seemed to disregard her completely. Such gaze. They weren't something she was unfamiliar with. This was how she had been looked at throughout her entire life. Yes. This is how it should be. It was only now that she felt comfortable looking back at her mother. What she was seeing was the mother she grew up seeing. You've finally shown your real self. Still talking. Ack. Feeling something pull at her hair, Angelica felt her body rise from the spot, and her expression distorted out of pain. Still, she tried her best to keep her gaze locked on her mother. The only reason you even bothered caring about me is because everyone else died, right? In reality, Angelica wasn't the only one that her mother had given birth to. She used to have 7 other siblings, all of whom were more talented than her. The key word was used to. They were no longer here. The only reason you even cared about me in the first place is because I'm the only one left, right? Her words seemed to have struck a chord with her mother, as Angelica suddenly found herself smacked against one of the pillars once again. Bang! She felt the wind get knocked out of her, and an intense pain radiated to her chest. Even so, she didn't let it show on her face as she continued. You're desperate. You're clearly aware that the other elders are trying to covet your position and without a suck. Bang. She was once again smacked against the pillar. This time with more force the pillar crumbled down. Rumble. Dust rose within the sturdy halls, and Angelica finally felt her mother let go of her. When everything settled, Angelica struggled to raise her head, but when she did she was met with two eyes that seemed to disregard her completely, and an open palm slowly reached out for her. Since you don't wish to keep your life, then I don't see why there's a need for you to keep it. Something dreadful suddenly manifested on the palm and was directed right at Angelica. In that short instant, Angelica understood that her life was coming to an end, and she closed her eyes. Instead of feeling sad, she felt rather liberated. She had finally managed to say what she wanted to say to her. Although she wouldn't get to live much longer, she knew that he would settle everything for her soon. The energy approached her and slowly crept into her body. Angelica slowly felt her existence crumble apart, but just as she was about to lose consciousness, she managed to hear a couple of faint words from the distance. Stop. It was a voice she was familiar with, and when she opened her eyes she saw Small Snake staring at them with an expressionless look. His current demeanor was a stark contrast to how he usually was, and it reminded Angelica of the time when she first saw him as the strategist. He looked like a completely different person. Strategist. The power that was seeping into her body stopped at his voice, and her mother turned her head. Why are you meddling in my matters? You should know that even if His Majesty treasures you, you can't change my decisions. That's not it. Small Snake shook his head, confusing everyone that was within the halls. The princess moved her hand away from Angelica and looked at him with a serious expression. Oh. Then what is it? It's not that I don't want you to kill her, but the moment that you kill her, the Lust clan will fall into chaos. He looked at Angelica. I'm sure you're a lot smarter than that, Princess Lilith. I know you understand perfectly what will happen if she were to die at this moment. Can you really keep all of the elders from revolting against you after her death? Can you really stop them from coveting your seat of honor? I'm not speaking to you as her acquaintance. I'm speaking to you as the Demon King's strategist. All of a sudden his voice deepened, and while there was no power in it, his words felt very commanding. Almost as if there was no rebuttal. If you kill her, then that's the same as seeding chaos within the clan of Lust, and I can't be having that at this very moment. Not when His Majesty is about to complete his long and cherished goal. His eyes suddenly squinted and his voice deepened. What do you think will happen when His Majesty comes to learn of your actions later? Is that a threat? Princess Lilith's gaze turned ferocious at his words. The room started to tremble as power seeped out of her body and she headed towards Small Snake. But even under such pressure he didn't waver in the slightest and stared at her with a calm gaze. At the moment, in Angelica's and everyone else's eyes, he looked powerful. It is a threat, he said as his hair fell on top of his face. I thought that was obvious enough. Ha. One could tell at a glance that the princess was beyond furious at the moment. Her expressions kept changing, and the power that radiated out of her body undulated with a certain ferocity that made it difficult for those within to withstand. She eventually managed to calm herself down and nod her head. Very well. Taking a deep breath, all of the power that was radiating from her body calmed down, and the entire hall quieted down. Since the strategist has spoken, I'll do as they've asked, but... The hall quieted down at her, and everyone held their breath. Turning her head, Princess Lilith looked at Angelica. I'll let her live, but on the condition that her core gets crippled and she births at least one successor for my lineage. She turned to look at Small Snake and smiled. That sounds fair, doesn't it? That. Opening his mouth, Small Snake seemed unsure of how to respond. Angelica's expression distorted at that moment. She'd rather die than be crippled and give birth to a successor. I won't compromise any further. You choose which option. Either she dies, or I cripple her and have her make me a successor. From the tone of her voice, everyone understood that there was no more compromising. Neither option was good, and Angelica gritted her teeth. Dawn. Her words stopped halfway as the room trembled and everyone felt something akin to dread. Crack. Right then a crack suddenly appeared and a hazy black figure walked out of it. The soft echo of its foot echoed within the hall, and almost everyone within the hall turned to look in the direction of where the figure was. The entire room fell silent. The eyes of a few people lit up the moment the figure came in, and a dreadful aura suddenly enveloped every part of the hall. It was so overbearing that it even made Princess Lilith wear a cautious look. Ren. Although he looked different than he usually did, Angelica recognized him immediately and breathed in relief. With him here, maybe things could be resolved. Every part of me hurt and I could feel my body barely hanging in there. Despite that, I transported myself directly to where Angelica and the others were. I couldn't allow another situation to occur, and thus even if it broke my body, I chose to teleport myself to them. I'll let her live, but on the condition that her core gets crippled and she births at least one successor for my lineage. Coming into the room, I heard faint voices. That sounds fair, doesn't it? I won't compromise any further. You choose which option. Either she dies, or I cripple her and have her make me a successor. The content of the words being spoken gave me an idea of what was happening, and scanning the entire room, my gaze eventually paused on a certain demoness. She was beautiful. Devastatingly so, but I wasn't entranced by her beauty. What attracted my attention was the power that radiated from her body. I knew who she was in an instant and my mouth parted open. How about we choose option 3? And that is? The princess asked, power radiating from her body. She was surprisingly calm when faced with my sudden appearance. Not that it mattered. She had to at least have this certain level of composure to be one of the 7 heads. In response to her, I pointed at her and the space around her started to constrict. Golden runes and words materialized all over her and clamped at her from all sides. The golden runes and words were significantly larger and more numerous than they had been during the first battle I had with Prince Murdoch, and they proved to be harder to remove than back then. My body started to tear at that point, but I bore through the pain and clenched my teeth. I couldn't permit myself to exhibit any sign of weakness. Not yet. You die and I take everyone with me. The laws within my body escaped and the world around us started to coat in white. What's this? Right after the space around Princess Lilith started to constrict, her entire body turned rigid. Her entire expression changed the moment she felt her space restricted, and with one look, I could tell she was even more shocked by the power that was binding her. How? Such reaction. It wasn't the first time I saw it. Rather, all 6 other demons showed similar looks when I exposed the laws within my body. Since you won. I was just about to attack when all of a sudden, the words that were about to come out of my mouth stopped. What? A certain figure caught my attention and I felt my lips quiver. No, it can't be. I must be seeing things. I blinked my eyes once, but he was still there. I blinked again. He was still there. I blinked once again, and he was still there. No matter how many times I blinked, he was still there and our gazes met. I wasn't sure how to react at the moment. The numbness I felt just moments prior started to disappear, and when I turned to look at Angelica, Ava, and Hein, I knew that I wasn't seeing things. I hoped I wasn't, and as my lips pursed, I took a deep breath and called out. Small snake. Time seemed to have suddenly frozen, and what broke it was his sudden smile as he nodded his head. Yes. Chapter 851. So similar yet so different. When Ashton City, Earth. Whyish. Coming out of the pocket dimension, Liam and Han Yufei were rather disoriented. The sudden change in environment confused them for a moment, and the fact that they hadn't been back on Earth for over 5 years didn't help with the situation. Are we back? It looks like it. The familiar city streets, the pillars in the faraway distance, the serene blue sky, they were truly back. Not that they had seen the pillars before. Liam sighed in relief, but he didn't get to enjoy the relief for very long. All of a sudden, the ground trembled and one of the skyscrapers near them collapsed. Boom. Something crashed against several of the buildings as they collapsed. They were taken aback when, after turning their heads to look at the structures, they noticed a familiar figure off in the distance. Liam was able to identify them in an instant, as evidenced by the sudden yellow glow that emanated from his eyes, and he quickly disappeared from the spot. Hey, wait for me. Appearing right above the skyscraper, Liam could hear Han Yufei's voice in the far distance, but he didn't particularly care and cocked his head. Do you need help? Bang. Crashing against the wall, Emma looked up and glared at Liam. What do you ok? Kwong. Crossing her daggers, she barely managed to block the demon's claw. Groaning, she nudged her head several times, as if trying to tell Liam to get on with it. Good thing that Liam got the message and lightning crackled around him. The demon that was on top of Emma immediately froze on the spot, and Liam appeared behind it. He slashed his hand across the demon's thigh as his eyes took on a yellowish tinge and began to shine even more brightly than before. That's where he felt the core was. Hyuk. That was about it for the demon. Just one move from Liam was all it took and its entire body turned to dust. Thank you. Catching her breath, Emma sighed in relief. Upon closer observation, Liam realized that Emma's complexion was rather bad. Her face was pale and her head was covered in sweat. Thinking about the demon that he had just defeated, his expression turned strange. You were struggling with just that? Actually, now that he took a closer look at her, she seemed different from how she normally was. He hadn't spent much time with her, so he wasn't too sure, but she seemed a little wilder. If that made any sense. Do you really think that's the only demon that I was up against? Catching her breath, she pointed toward the distance, and that was when Liam finally noticed. A street littered with demon corpses. It was a sight to behold, and his mouth instantly shut. That's fair enough. No shit. I'm fucking tired. Well, he could tell. The fact that speaking made her this tired was a great testament to that. Want a potion? He offered her a potion as an apology, but she rejected him right away. I'm good. Well, suit yourself. Putting the potion away, Han Yufei suddenly appeared beside them. With his broadsword on his back, he gazed at the streets hidden behind the skyscraper and put up a thumbs up. Wow, impressive. Thank you. Emma thanked him politely, taking out one of her own potions and gulping it down. Her chest started to level at that point and her breath returned. Just as she was about to speak, Liam's expression suddenly changed, and his head snapped upwards toward the sky. What's wrong? Suddenly noticing the shift in Liam's expression, Han Yufei and Emma looked at him. He didn't respond to them and continued to stare at the sky for a good couple of seconds before his eyes suddenly shone with a brilliant hue of yellow that enveloped the entire surroundings. Liam. His action startled both of them, but his subsequent words startled them even more. Do you have any way to contact the others? His voice, which always seemed lazy and lethargic, had an unusual seriousness to it that made both Han Yufei and Emma look at each other in confusion. They nonetheless thought about his words, and Han Yufei was the first one to answer. Ryan. He knows of a way to contact everyone. Okay. Liam nodded his head. Contact him and tell him that he is coming. He. No one said a word upon coming out of the dimensional pocket. Be it Angelica, Hein, Ava or Small Snake. They all just stared quietly at the world around them without saying a word. What they'd wittiness is inside of the pillar. Are you? Ava was the one who eventually broke the silence as she turned to face Angelica. She was quietly staring at the ground, her thoughts unknown. Everyone turned their attention toward Angelica, following her words, and sensing the attention she was being given, Angelica raised her head. I'm fine. She was. At least that was what she tried to make herself believe. Reality was that she wasn't sure. The scene she witnessed, it wasn't something she wanted to remember. Even though Angelica knew it had to be done and she deserved it, it still left her empty. That was her very own mother. Someone she looked up to despite hating her at the same time. Are you sure you're okay? A soft voice reached her ears, and when she turned, she saw a face she hadn't seen for quite a while. I'm fine. She smiled at Small Snake. Well, I'll believe you for now. It was clear that he could see right through her, but it was good that he let the topic go and shifted his attention toward Ava. What are we sup? Ava? Hein? I can feel your communication. Are you guys there? Small Snake was stopped by a familiar voice that echoed from Ava's watch. He froze the moment he heard the voice. Ryan. Ava raised her watch and brought it to her lips. Ryan, is that you? Who else would it be? I'm the only one. Oh no, never mind. That's not important. I was just about to say. Ryan. Small Snake spoke, moving closer to Ava. It was there that the communication abruptly turned silent. Ryan. Small Snake called out once more, hoping that he could hear him. But yet again he was met with no response. Just as he was about to try again, the communication turned on again. Is this some sort of sick joke? What are you guys trying to pull? No, never mind, I don't have time to deal with this shit. There was clear anger in his voice as he spoke, and when Small Snake heard his words he smiled. So he still remembers my voice. The thought made him smile even more and his head moved closer to the watch. He tapped on the screen and a projection appeared in front of him. Turning the camera on, Small Snake waved, a soft smile on his lips. After seeing him again he had a lot of things he wanted to say to him. He had changed a lot in appearance since the last time he saw him. He had become an adult and looking at how disheveled his appearance was, he knew that he must have had a hard time during the few years he wasn't there. "You've grown up a lot." Such were the words that came out of his mouth when he saw him. He could have started with something else, but his appearance was what reminded him of how times had changed and that he was no longer the young teen he once used to know. On the other side, Ryan's expression froze, and when his gaze met Small Snake's, his eyes blinked several times until, eventually, droplets of water streaked past his cheek. Blinking more, he brought his arms over his face and continued to wipe at whatever was falling, his expression never changing. "Who?" Covering his face with his hands, he hoarsely spoke. "Dubu. Well, as of the time that you left, I am approximately the same age as you were." "Ah. I see." Small Snake smiled, his lips trembling a bit. "Same age, huh? I sure missed a lot." Yeah, you did." In an unknown area, Earth. The world outside the pillars was a mess. Buildings crumbled, ecosystems were torn apart, and the ground was shredded into nothingness. Gene wielded his daggers like they were an extension of his body, slicing at the enemies with such utter precision that they didn't even have the time to react. The accuracy of his attacks completely shattered their cores in one go, killing them immediately. Thump. What's more, stepping onto the ground, black threads would spike out from the point between his foot and the ground, shooting directly at the demons near him and impaling them directly at their cores. His skills had improved drastically over the years, and he was now at a level where only prince-ranked demons could pose a threat to him. Not bad. Priscilla turned to look at Jean with a look of pleasant surprise. Being the closest one to Jean, she could see just how much finesse his movements had. As someone who was nearing prince rank herself, she could see through his every move. His power was quite rare and extremely good when dealing with multiple opponents. Impressed. Her train of thought was interrupted by Jin's voice as he appeared behind her without any warning. Reaching out with his hand, he grabbed a demon by its throat and clenched his hand tightly, tearing the head off. Then, moving one of his fingers up, thin threads burst from the ground and enveloped the entire body of the demon, sinking it to the ground. "Don't flatter yourself." Priscilla snorted and waved her hand. "Whom?" Immediately, the surrounding space shook, and a tidal wave of demonic energy burst forth from her hand, enveloping several monsters and demons approaching in their direction. "You're still too early to compete with me. You want to bet? On what? On who gets the most kills?" With another snort, Priscilla smirked and her pink hair started to flutter. Her crimson eyes shone with a strange power, and every demon and monster near them suddenly slowed down. Though Jean seemed serious, Priscilla found his actions laughable. After she had shown him her powers, how did he still think that he had a chance against her? Did he have something else up his sleeves? If he did, what was it? He suddenly grew curious. "All right, I'll play with you. What does the winner get?" "Why are you asking if you already know the answer?" "I just need to make sure. I've already learned my lesson the last time." Feeling her subtle glare, Jean turned his head and pretended to not have heard her words. She sure knows how to hold her grudge. She reminded him of a certain someone. Maybe just not as petty. It's hard to find someone as bad as him. Truthfully, he didn't know if such a person existed. Nor did he want to imagine. If such person truly existed, he wouldn't want to meet them. "When do we start?" Priscilla's demonic energy started to spread throughout every inch of the area they were in. At the same time, Jean grabbed his two daggers and got into position. "We can start whenever you're ready." "I'm ready." "Okay then." The two of them were just about to get ready when all of a sudden, a voice transmitted into Jin's mind. "Whatever you're doing, get cover." "Huh? Who is this?" Jean looked around in surprise. His actions caught Priscilla's attention and she teased. "What's with you? Backing out already?" Quiet for a moment. But Jin's serious expression made her instantly understand that the situation was not as it seemed. "Jean, if you're hearing this, immediately find cover." A static sound filled Jin's ears halfway through. "Hello? What's going on?" BZZ. Hide, he is calm, BZZZ. What? He is coming? Who is Ko? For. Crack. With a sudden distortion of the space above, a subtle cracking sound echoed from above, and the entire planet came to a sudden standstill. Almost at the same time that happened, Jean turned his head and his heart stopped. The same went for many of the humans and Alliance members fighting, as despair suddenly clouded their minds. A gentle voice transmitted into the ears of everyone present as a figure stood in the skies. You tried your best to delay the inevitable, but... With long white hair that fluttered in the wind and two crimson-red eyes that looked down upon everything beneath, a figure unlike any other stood above the skies, and as if ink had dropped on paper, the skies began to gradually turn red. I am here. Chapter 852. So similar yet so different. As the sun shone high in the sky, illuminating all that was beneath, a foreboding crack split the sky. It began as a hairline fracture but quickly widened, tearing apart the fabric of reality with an eerie, otherworldly glow. Gasps of awe and fear echoed through the land as the crack expanded and a terrifying energy swept throughout the earth. What's going on? Something is coming. The fights that were happening beneath stalled, and everyone looked up in utter nervousness and fear. From the depths of the fissure, an imposing figure emerged, stepping out onto earth with an air of absolute authority. Appearing in the sky, Jezebeth exuded an aura of pure darkness, his eyes burning with a malevolent crimson glow that pierced through the world like fiery embers. His skin was ashen, marred with sinister runes that seemed to pulse with demonic energy. His sharp, angular features were twisted into a small smile that exuded boundless confidence. He wore a tattered cloak that billowed around him, seemingly made of shadows themselves, swirling and undulating as if alive. His armor was a macabre fusion of metal and cores that glinted with a malevolent light. Each step he took sent tremors through the ground, causing the very earth to shudder as a result. As Jezebeth emerged fully from the crack in the sky, he surveyed the land with a sense of authority. This was the second time he had returned to Earth, and just when he thought he'd put an end to everything, things took an unexpected turn and he was transported out. Perhaps to buy time or perhaps something else. It no longer mattered to Jezebeth. But still, why did he choose to bring him out when he knew full well that their powers could destroy the entire planet? I hope I'm not too late. Jezebeth's presence was palpable, radiating a sense of overwhelming power and darkness that seemed to suffocate the very air. The surrounding flora withered and died in his wake, and the temperature dropped, leaving a frigid chill in the air. Jezebeth's arrival sent shockwaves through the earth, igniting fear and panic among the Alliance members. He is here. We supposed to beat that. Some fell to their knees, unable to withstand the sheer weight of his presence, while others rallied to resist, albeit with trembling resolve. The skies were dyed red and the earth seemed to tremble. As everyone's eyes fell on the Demon King, a pair of grayish eyes similarly looked up. They belonged to Rin, who was currently lying on a patch of green grass, unable to move. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth, and his body trembled from time to time. "Time's up," he muttered, albeit weakly. He had done everything he could to delay the inevitable. Staring at Jezebeth's figure, he saw him turn his head and their gazes met. Jezebeth smiled, and though Rin couldn't see clearly, he thought he saw him mouth the words, "I see you." Taking a deep breath, Ren's chest heaved upward and his eyes gradually came to a close. When he opened them up again, the entire world had changed. He was no longer lying down on the patch of grass. He was now standing in an empty world with a cloudless blue sky and a white floor, in which he could see his own reflection in. When he raised his head, he found a certain figure standing. "You planned this all out, didn't you?" There stood someone with whom he was all too familiar with. He looked strikingly similar to him, apart from his eyes and hair, which were of different colors. "Again and again you play these kinds of tricks as if this is some sort of game that you're playing." There was a certain something in his voice as he spoke. Closing his eyes, Rin simply let him speak. Whatever he was saying, he wasn't wrong. "If you want to vent, just vent, but I'll have you know that we don't have much time at our hands. You just..." Opening his eyes again, he found his other self shaking his head. He looked like he wanted to say something. A lot of things. But he forced himself not to. "I'll satiate your curiosity. Ren spoke, his eyes focusing on his other self. Yes. I indeed knew about everything that was going to happen. Yes, I purposely sent you to the Pillar of Envy first. Yes, I knew that small snake was still alive and purposely sent him to the Pillar of Lust, and yes, I knew that our father was going to die. Pausing, he added. I made sure that last part happened. Everything went silent after his words. There was a certain order to his actions. It wasn't hard to predict which of the pillars Ren would go after. The Pillar of Envy. They followed a certain sequence which Ren knew his other self would follow. Death, as sad as it was a great motivator for changing someone and making them seek a goal wholeheartedly. Worrying about how much his actions would impede those within the pillars and wasting time figuring out how to kill someone was not something that Ren desired. Time was of the essence, and in order for that to happen someone had to go. Deliberating over the matter, he thought that the most appropriate choice was none other than their father. Someone whose death would have the greatest of impact. Sending Small Snake to the last pillar was also no coincidence. He was his assurance. An assurance that would stop him from ever turning out like him. Everything had been planned out from the beginning, and the fact that he stood before him was a testament that his plan had worked. I trust you already know why I did what I did, right? His words lingered in the air for a brief moment as silence continued to reign over the space where the two of them were. You're too emotional and soft, right? Getting cut all of a sudden left a bitter taste in Ren's mouth, but he nodded his head. At least you're self-aware. I get it. Surprisingly, he seemed to have accepted the circumstances. When Ren looked at him, he could see an unsettling tranquility in him. It was odd but at the same time pleasing to see. Are you mad? About what? About the things that I did. While Ren didn't feel sorry about what he did find his tranquility odd. His next words brought about even more confusion. Why would I be? Didn't I? I've already figured you out. Ren was once again cut off. The bitter taste in his mouth grew, but he once again let it slide. What he said attracted his attention more. You figured me out? Emichung. Nodding his head, Ren watched as his other self took several steps in his direction. But within the empty space, the only sound that echoed was the rhythmical sound of his steps moving closer to him, until he eventually stopped a couple of meters away from him. My father's not really dead, is he? That feeling I felt before I sent them to Amora. Where I felt my heart suddenly beat with unease. It was your doing, wasn't it? Ah. The sudden question brought about confusion in Ren's mind, but before he could speak the other version of him spoke once more. Deep down. You're not as heartless as you make yourself out to be. When I think about it, at the end of the day you're still me, and I know myself better than anyone else. Especially since I know for a fact that you never had to do this from the very beginning, and if you wanted to, you could have defeated Jezebeth without my help, or me needing to do all the things that I did. Clearly, you were trying to prepare me for something. Feeling something touch his chest, Ren looked to see a finger pointed at him. You never lost your emotions. They've always been there, and you just sealed them to numb yourself from the pain that you felt. If you were really as heartless as you make yourself out to be, why did you even bother doing what you did? You had the chance to kill yourself, yet you didn't. Something triggered what you sealed, and hence why you've helped. Everything you did was for something. Perhaps I wasn't ready for whatever you were planning, and you had me absorb all of the laws hidden within the 7 heads in order to get ready for whatever you were planning, but knowing myself very well, I know you'd never let our father die. For the very first time in quite a long time, Ren found himself unable to speak, and he eventually lowered his head. Slowly his lips curled and he shook his head. You really what? It doesn't feel good, does it? It doesn't. Ren shook his head and almost laughed. Is this how he felt whenever I saw through him? It sucks. He finally understood how it felt to be seen through, and he had to admit that he really disliked the feeling. It's good that you finally realize it. Feeling his finger move away from his chest, Ren raised his head, and his eyes met with his other self. Looking directly at them, he could see his own reflection in them. They were so similar yet so strikingly different. Perhaps it was a reflection of who they really were. Two people that looked the same but traveled completely different paths. He was the result of everything that could have gone wrong, and he was the result of everything that could have gone right. So similar yet so different.